let me introduce our research findings. My research findings with my co-author representing МГИМО University. We would like to present the interim findings of the research conducted on sustainability in transportation in North America. You might ask us, why North America? Well, first of all, because the majority of research on green transport is done on the example of the European Union. Second, the USMCA agreement, which came in force on the 1st of July 2020, is extremely politicized. And among the economic dimensions, very few research is done on green transport. Unfortunately, because the environmental provision of the USMCA is promising. So the research hypothesis of our investigation has been formulated as following, that through the liberalization of cabotage shipments across the North America and by the implementation of environmental provisions of the USMCA agreement, North American states can get a springboard for sustainability in transport and logistics at large. So first of all, let me introduce a very specific term of cabotage for those who are not aware of that. So we are talking about cabotage shipments. This is a kind of transportation done by a foreign carrier between the points across another state. So for example, a Canadian carrier is doing a cabotage shipment between Washington and New York. So this will be a cabotage shipment for the United States. I will be extremely precise. Well, first of all, we've measured the ecological footprint of the United States, Mexico and Canada. And unfortunately, we found that this region is lagging behind other regions. We've taken the following dimensions. So the greenhouse gas emissions, the municipal solid waste, food waste and loss, and the marine litter. So you see these striking figures, and I want to stress that annually the Americans, for instance, generate 3 times more waste than the Chinese do. However, they do recycle 1/3 less than the Germans, who are the leaders in the recycling industry. So today we have named already the circular economics, the concept of circular economics. And exactly this circularity could be applied to the transportation. However, if you have a look at this table, you will see that the main pollutant is the truck industry. You might be embarrassed by the figure of 23.0, but this figure accounts for medium and heavy duty trucks. So those who directly transport cargo. But if we add light vessels, so this figure will be around 83%. So we have identified that the road or truck transportation is the main pollutant in North America. Well, this figure corresponds with the global level. For example, if we have a look at the estimates of International Energy Agency, so the road transportation accounts for 75% of the overall greenhouse gas emissions. So in this case, North America is around the global trend. However, it is doing better in the case of emission control. And mainly, this is vivid in the case of maritime transportation. You might have heard about International Maritime Organization and its green initiatives. So starting from the 1st of January 2020, the IMO has introduced a new regulation setting the level of sulfur content in marine fuel at the level of 0.5%. And it is here where North America is overperforming other regions. So there are 2 emission control areas around mainly Canada, Mexico, and Canada, Mexico, and the United States, where this level is already lowered to 0.1%. So this is a striking fact. However, the main problem in our point of view for the development of green transport in the United States is the restrictions on cabotage. For example, if you have a look at the national legislature, you will see that the cabotage is forbidden in all 3 states if we want to transport passengers or cargo by water, by road, and by air. So if you have a look at the picture at the right corner, you will see that "Hi American." Yeah, it's not a political slogan regarding the elections in the United States. It's just a mere fact. For example, if we take the transportation of military cargo, then according to the United States legislature, only American vessels under the US flag, vessels with the American crew, are allowed to transport such kind of cargo. Moreover, if we take into consideration the Jones Act, effective from 1920, it completely forbids the usage of other vessels under other flags near the coastal shipments of the United States. So to put it differently, we can easily say that this is a kind of protectionism in transportation. And Canada and Mexico are not do not make a big difference, frankly speaking. However, they have some exceptions. So now I want to pass over the floor to my colleague to go on with the discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, so Jones Act is indeed considered to be the most vivid example of protectionism in transport around the globe. By the law, any commercial marine carriage between the points in the US could be done only by US built, US registered, US owned, and US crewed vessels. So the underutilization of the water transportation, as we have outlined in the table previously, is largely attributed to the high cost of the marine transport as a result of the Jones Act. In the slide, you can see that the US Maritime Organization estimates that the costs for operating such vessels are 3 times higher than for the vessels under the foreign flags. Besides, the Jones Act directly affects the configuration of supply chains and preeminently the promotion of renewables, namely wind turbines. In the slide, you can see the unique vessels that are demanded for the installation of the wind turbines. Under the Jones Act, a company in the renewable energy industry has 2 options in terms of their installation. First, it can either charter a single foreign flagged vessel to carry the turbines from abroad and install them. And otherwise, it is the second option. It is for this company to charter 2 vessels. One which is Jones Act compliant, and another a foreign installation vessel that is not present in the US Jones Act fleet. To facilitate the development of the renewable energy of the US coast, the first Jones Act compliant fleet was slated by the end of the previous year. However, later, due to certain circumstances, it was delayed and postponed to 2023. In the absence of such acts, and if we take the abolition of such measures, Fitzgerald estimates that the benefit would loosely range between 109 million and 8.2 billion. Similar laws exist in Canada and Mexico. However, there are certain exceptions to the cabotage restrictions in the modes of transport. So first of all, it is the waivers for force majeure situations like the oil spills, as was the case with the Gulf of Mexico oil spill back in 2008, I guess. So the second exception is the carriage of empty or deadhead containers between the domestic ports. And the third one is only in case if the shortage of appropriate vehicles, the appropriate means exists. So in Mexico, they provide the foreign carriers with the cabotage permits and OECD found that such carriages account for the whopping 1/3 of the Mexico's coastal shipping, predominantly in oil and bulk cargoes. Ultimately, we researched deeply into the provisions of the new USMCA agreement, which came into force this year, actually, in July, on July 1st. And it is quite a legacy of the going president. Briefly, the environmental part of the USMCA significantly builds on the previous NAFTA agreement and specifically its side agreement, North American agreement on environmental cooperation. The side agreements measured are by the international accordance, not binding in nature. And these not binding previously measures have now been incorporated into a separate chapter of the new USMCA agreement. It is called Chapter 24, Environment. These measures are subjected to the built-in dispute resolution procedures and strict legal action that pertain to the possible violations of such measures. All 7 multilateral environmental agreements, which we outlined in the slide, actually they are the conventions under the United Nations to which almost all countries in the world are parties to. All 7 of these MEAs were included in the USMCA as binding for all the 3 states that are parties to USMCA, so the US, Canada, and Mexico. 2 debated measures, fortunately, were not transferred into the main body of the agreement. First, it is the notorious NAFTA proportionality clause for Canada's energy exports, by which Canada was obligated to extract even more oil year on year, and it really crudely constrained its transition to renewables under the Paris Agreement. And the second debated measure, which did not transfer to the new agreement, is the ISDS mechanisms and their abrogation. Such cases were won by the investors. They used to file disputes against the domestic legislation of the states, and they were usually resolved in favor of such investors. Now, this practice is no longer valid. However, and the potentially, which is the saddest and the most disappointing fact, is that neither Chapter 4 of the main USMCA agreement nor its new side ECA agreement contains such salient terms of the modern environmental agenda, such as climate change, greenhouse gases, or renewable energy. Neither of these terms are mentioned in the text, in the body, or in the side agreement. So ultimately, we conclude with the reinforced hypothesis that we stated at the beginning, that the liberalization of shipping by the introduction of cabotage rights, together with the implementation of the USMCA environmental provisions, are crucial in raising sustainability in the regional transportation.